us. She wrote her name. Chad Reuter, NFL.com. Chad, thank you for your patience. We appreciate hanging out in the virtual green room. And buckle up. It's a double chin strap affair on the Football Playbook every time you join. Love talking football with you. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I just wish I had Oceana's artistic, abilities. I don't. Mine would look much worse than that. So good job on her.
We do X's and O's here, you and I. She
Yeah,
gets into the diagrams, but no, we're chopping it up, breaking it down, and it's an exciting week because I just had Dane on from the NFLPA Bowl. We sent out our invitations this week. I see the Senior Bowl. Jim Nagy's he's got the private jet. It looks like he's flying out personally, hand delivering some of these invites, and of course the East West Shrine Bowl now also announcing their first wave of acceptances. So it's a very exciting time for us draftniks, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We start to the rubber hits the road a little bit starting in November. We really get to see who's going where, and it's getting close. It's getting close. It's almost time to get on that plane.
Yeah, and it's going to be a big draft year for the Philadelphia Eagles because they have 10 or 11 pending starters who are going to be free agents and another 4 or 5 key role players. So you're talking about maybe a third of their roster that, they're not going to be able to sign them all. The draft is going to be important. Of course, they hold the New Orleans Saints pick, which is now the number 6 overall. So you're talking about a playoff contender who could also hold a possible top 5, top 10 selection. And we're going to get into some of your favorite prospects. And we just talked about Will Levis, somebody I'm curious to get your opinion about. But first, just the Philadelphia Eagles from an outside perspective. Obviously, you don't cover them on a daily basis like we do here on the Football Playbook.
Yeah.
But I talked about it at the top of the show. Like, a lot of people credit Kansas City and the Buffalo Bills. I look at the Eagles offense like a chameleon. They could throw it deep. They could dink and dunk. They can slice and dice it. They can ground and pound. I mean, there's really no weaknesses when I look at the offense. The defense is not too shabby either. But I'm curious, what do you see when you take an outside perspective at the Eagles? Any chance they can run the table here? Do you like them going far into the playoffs? What is your Chad Reuter take on the Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say anybody's going to run the table, okay? It just doesn't happen very often.
Fair enough.
But you got to love this team. My Packers, not so great. But for a team out of the NFC, I'd love to see the Eagles be the ones going to the Super Bowl. I'd love that. Just a few things that I've researched because that's what I do. The 8-0 teams, there's been 11 of them since 2009. Okay. And none of them have won the Super Bowl except for in 2009 when the Saints beat the Colts. They were both 8-0 teams. Okay. But since then, nobody else. Okay.
Interesting.
Most of the teams that go 8-0, 4 of them lost the next game to go 8-1. Okay. And the last time it happened, Pittsburgh lost to Washington at home. So maybe not a great omen. Now, do I expect the Eagles to lose to Washington? No, I do not. I do not expect that. But, in division, usually on the road, teams find it difficult to make it through all the way to 17-0, 16-0, what have you. So I would guess that, at Dallas, at the Giants, one of these teams with a lot of knowledge about the Eagles squad will probably pull one out against them. But again, love the Eagles team. You got to love what they're doing. You got to love what Jalen Hurts is doing. You got to love that the defense is showing up. A lot to like about this team. So I'll be rooting for them to go to the Super Bowl this year, with my Packers not, looking so hot.
A lot to like, but you're here to give us the death sentence of what 8-0 really means.
Well, look, 15-2 or 16-1, not a death sentence. All right, not a death sentence, believe me. But it's just the likelihood isn't there. But if they did it, great on them.
No, I think 15-2 is probably realistic. Let me ask you this, just from a personal opinion, because there could be a scenario like the last 2 games of the year, they got the Saints and the Giants.
Yeah.
And I'll ask you more about the Packers, but they got the Commanders, Colts, and Packers this month. So they could go into December 11-0. But
looking at their schedule, it's not bad, right? Yeah, it's not a bad schedule to run that table. But like I said, one of the road one of the road teams against an in division opponent, it's going to be tough to
No,
make
I
it.
agree.
Yeah.
I think the Cowboys and the Giants are both going to play them tough. I really believe that. And the question is, though, like with this expanded playoff format, 14 teams, almost half the league gets in.
Yeah.
I almost feel like, I'm a guy, and this is just personal opinion. I'm a guy, I hate to take the foot off the gas pedal, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if those last 2 games against the Saints and Giants are meaningless, right? You kind of play your backups.
Yeah.
Then you get the first round bye.
Yep.
Then almost like 4 weeks go by until you play a meaningful game. Meanwhile, your opponent has been scrapping and clawing every week, fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
This is just a personal preference. I hate taking the foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah.
Are you a proponent? Are you an advocate of resting the starters?
I think it's smart. I think it's smart to do so. Like, for example, would I play Jalen Hurts week 18 if it would make sense not to? No, I wouldn't. I think if you wanted to play him for a quarter, treat it like a preseason game, just to keep him in the rhythm of being a starter, that's fine.
All right.
But you've seen, Tua in college. He got hurt in college just playing meaningless second half, like he should have been out early in that game. I don't love it. But I think week 18, everything's in hand. Sit Jalen Hurts, sit guys that are maybe a little more banged up than others. Everybody's banged up this time of year.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't do it in week 17 or week 16. I wouldn't go that far. I think you have to keep your guys in the rhythm of playing as much as possible. But you just have to be smart at some point and just say, look, if this guy goes down in week 18 and we didn't need to play him, that's just not very smart.
No, I tend to agree. And, you mentioned the Packers who – what are they 3-6 now? Is that what their record is?
Yeah, it's not good. No.
But the NFL is so mediocre. I hate to use that word, but there's so many teams lingering around 500, Chad. I mean, this is a team that could rally the troops, or do you think that
9-8 could get you in the playoffs this year in the NFC? It just could. And so you never know. You don't give up. These guys aren't going to give up. I'm not into tanking for whoever you want to tank for. Not into that. These guys are too competitive. Do I think they can get back to 9-8? Yes, I think they could get back to 9-8, but could be a tough road. So I'm not banking on it. I'm banking on a 7-10, 8-9, kind of year for them. Not great. And then after that, who knows with Aaron Rodgers, he may decide just to hang it up and do whatever he does in his free time. I think it could be a rough road, but I don't count any teams out because they're just too talented. They're just too competitive. And like you said, I don't call it mediocre. I believe there is so much talent. Like a lot of teams, you talk about running backs in the draft. Oh, they shouldn't go in the top 10 because, blah, 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 blah. And it's not because they're not talented. It's because there are so many talented teams. And I think that are running backs. And I think that's the same in the NFL. I think there's so much talent out there and they're all so competitive. They all want it that badly that you can't take a week off against any team. So that's the way that I look at it.
No doubt about it. And you talk about running backs, Bijan Robinson's a pretty good one coming out of Texas. Miles Sanders, a free agent here in Philadelphia. The Eagles holding 2 first-round picks. Kind of transitions into the NFL draft, which I wanted to get into, which is what you do for NFL.com.
That's right.
One of the best in the business, by the way. We're so blessed to have you here.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Rick. Coming from one of those himself, I will definitely take that.
No, I appreciate that. So game recognized game. So, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you because, the casual football fan or the casual NFL fan, and there's some crossover fans that have their fingers on the tabs when it comes to both. Paul Mancini would be an example of that in the chat room. But a lot of people in the chat say, oh, man, they got the Saints pick. It's number 6. Man, Will Anderson would be so good. Oh, Jalen Carter. Fletcher Cox is a free agent. Javon Hargrave's a free agent. We should go get Jalen Carter. But realistically, I mean, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, they might go 1-2. They might not. They might not be there for the Eagles. Like,
Right.
Who are those guys after the tier 1 prospects or the blue chippers? And maybe they are also blue chippers. Like, it's hard for me to put a running back up there, but Bijan Robinson is probably as good as I've seen from Saquon Barkley. There's a couple of offensive linemen out there floating around. How do you see kind of, and I'll circle back to the quarterbacks. Let's keep them out of this conversation. Non-quarterbacks.
Yeah, non-quarterbacks.
Will Anderson, Jalen Carter. How does the big board break down after that?
Well, I think after Anderson and Carter, I think you're talking about Olu Fushanu from Penn State, the left tackle. He's my favorite left tackle in this draft. And I think he could play on the right side if you want him to. The thing is, he's just not a lot of experience. He started one game coming into this year. So
19 years old, I should mention, right?
Yeah. And so I think that's really it'll be interesting if he decides to come out. We don't know that he is.
But
in terms of talent, in terms of upside, he's the best guy in this draft at left tackle. So if he decides to come out, certainly that's a guy you have to look for. Keely Ringo is another guy you have to look at in the top 10 as a cornerback out of Georgia. I think, that interception he had against Tennessee showed you everything you need to know. He can hit a guy at the line of scrimmage. He can run with any receiver downfield. He can play the ball. He looks for the ball, can play the ball, can make the interception. He does all that stuff. He's a physical player. So I think he's a guy in the top 10 that you're going to be looking at as well. So those are two guys I love. Other guys that the Eagles may or may not really have interest in. Miles Murphy, defensive end from Clemson. He's a big, strong guy. And I think if you want to play him as a 5 technique, he's got that ability to do so. So teams that are looking for that, he can do that, but he can also play the power end in the 4-man front. So I think, the Eagles may have interest in him as well. So the other guy is Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. I think he's probably the only senior that would be a top 10 pick, maybe Will Levis, depending on if a team moves up for him or what, how interesting.
This Texas Tech kid is skyrocketed up the draft boards around the league.
Yeah, he's been in my top couple, since the beginning of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, he's really been way up there because I think he knows he's got position versatility because he's about 6'6", 275, but he runs really well. I mean, you don't see a guy that big charged with taking running backs out of the backfield very often, and he does that. But he can also put his hand on the ground. He's got great length, and he's really a strong player. So I think the versatility makes him a potential top 10 pick. So I think he's another guy that people have to watch. If he works out like Travon Walker did, who, by the way, we weren't talking about the number 1 pick with him at this time of the year last year, right? So if Tyree Wilson puts that kind of workout up, him or Andre Carter from Army, by the way, who we don't really talk about a lot because, he doesn't have as many sacks this year. But if you actually watch his agility at 6'6", 260 pounds, it's pretty amazing. And he could have one of these workouts that gets us really excited about him too. So that's a couple edge guys, a couple seniors that could, really make their way into the top 10. And those are some of the guys that I would think would be in that conversation in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Andre Carter out of Army. It's kind of like Marcus Davenport out of UTEP a couple years ago. People are like, who's this guy? Oh, wow, he's the real deal.
Yeah.
I agree. Like Miles Murphy's a guy that's been on my radar for several seasons. I love this kid. Brian Barisi, his teammate, by the way, not too shabby either.
Yep.
You mentioned Keely Ringo. I agree with you there. And then the Penn State offensive tackle is fascinating. But I went out to Happy Valley in August.
Yeah.
I could not take my eyes. I may have never used this word in my life, Chad, until I saw Joey Porter Jr., but I had a man crush. I could not take my eyes off of this guy. He is big. He's fast. He's physical. Oh, by the way, he's the son of Joey Porter. This guy is a really good-looking prospect.
He is. I'm very glad he decided to return to school though last year because last year he was very inconsistent in terms of where his eyes were in coverage, things like that. he's gotten better this year. And I think if you use him in the right ways, he could be a very, very good pro. I would still put Ringo ahead of him. But I think he's got a chance of being a very good pro. You see the physicality, you see the size. Speed will be interesting. Recovery speed, I'll be interested to see how he looks on the field at the combine this year, to see how that plays out. Recovery speed's always interesting with his bigger corners. So he's got some things that he could get better at. But like you said, he's an impressive prospect. And I think Fashanu is going to be that guy that scouts are going to be like, oh, this guy could be really, really good. He's got length, and he's not. A lot of guys that are that young don't have like the lower body strength. They tend to be a little smaller in the legs, but this dude is not like that. He has gotten big in the caboose, as they say, and he's got a lot of potential. So I think he's the guy that could go pretty high. And certainly the Eagles should be looking in that direction.
Yeah, big in the caboose. I like my offensive line with the bubble butts, Chad.
Yeah. I mean, look, we've seen the opposite, and guys with these tall guys that have length are athletic, but they don't have that anchor. Jason Spriggs, some of these guys that just doesn't come to them. But Fashanu's got the anchor, and so that's what makes him more excited about him than any other tackles.
Yeah, man, great knowledge here, Chad Reuter, a guy from NFL.com. Just love talking football with you. So I want to turn the attention to the quarterback class because, I'm starting to think that this might be an overrated.
We're officially in quarterback hate season. It's arrived. It's arrived. Every year is the same. Hey, wait until next year's draft class.
Yeah.
In September. Oh, these guys are great. Then they don't make every throw exactly the way we expect them to, or they lose a couple of games, and then people, start hating on them. That's the way it goes. Okay.
All right.
Now,
well, here's where I'm going to go with this.
Yeah.
All right. So listen, I'm a big fan of Justin Fields coming out of college.
Yep.
CJ Stroud is an entirely different quarterback. I get it.
Yep.
But just saying, like, hey, from a franchise game-changing perspective.
Yes.
I say, listen, to me, if I got to build a team around a quarterback, I like Justin. Like, if Justin Fields was in this year's draft, he's the top guy, in my opinion. I like him more than CJ Stroud.
Okay.
For my money, Chad, I like Bryce Young more than CJ Stroud. Now, I have a hard time getting over the height. 5'11". We saw the durability.
He's not 5'11". He's not 5'11".
What is he?
He can't be. He's got to be 5'10" and change at the most. Okay.
Wow.
And I still don't care because he's really good. He's just a playmaker.
I always do the test because I'm like 6 foot on the button. So like I always do the test. Like,
yeah, I would be surprised if he was 5'11".
Wow.
But I don't care about that. And here's why. You've seen what Kyler Murray has done, and I think Bryce Young is better than Kyler Murray in the pocket. He's less frenetic as a runner. He's a very smart runner, very smart player.
Okay.
So I really like Bryce Young.
Well, I guess like I look at a guy like Baker Mayfield on the opposite end of the spectrum. He's led the league in batted down balls since he's been in the NFL, right?
Yep.
So like that bothers me. The durability kind of bothers me, but I think Bryce Young makes the rare throws that other quarterbacks can't. So to me,
Baker Mayfield is not as adept as getting out of the pocket and creating room for himself as Bryce Young is.
True.
Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, even a guy like Derek Carr is not the biggest guy in the league, right? At quarterback position. He's kind of thin, at the most 6'2". He's probably shrunk at this point. He's so old. That's what happens to all of us. Guys like that, you get outside the pocket and you make throws there. And Bryce Young's very good at that. And, even moving within the pocket, Young is pretty good at that. And he's not great, but he can move within the pocket a little bit. He's not, it's not necessarily one or the other with that guy. You look at a guy like Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, had a really good year, right? You leave him in the pocket. You've got the pocket. He can make a lot of throws, okay? He's not great at stepping up in the pocket, moving within the pocket, getting outside the pocket. That's not his game. And C.J. Stroud, I think, is similar to Hendon Hooker, but I think the more you watch Stroud, the more you see that he can move within the pocket. And, that's not his elite, like he's going to bail to the right, like most right-handed quarterbacks. And he can make throws on the run better than a guy like Hooker, for example. So I like C.J. Stroud a little bit more when I really watch him and pay attention. When you're throwing to Marvin Harrison, you're going to look good, right? I mean, that's part of the thing.
Those receivers are ridiculous out
there.
Yeah.
And if Bryce Young had Marvin Harrison right now, or even if he had Jameson Williams back right now, they wouldn't have lost those 2 games, I don't think. So I think Stroud, I was kind of in your camp coming into the year on him, more of a pocket guy. He doesn't move as well. But I think he's shown enough this year to show teams, hey, I've worked on that. And when he gets to a quarterback coach after the season, and that's all they're doing is working on footwork, working on his ability to turn his shoulders and throw to the left, I think he's going to look even better to teams at that point. And, Stroud's arm is fantastic. I mean, that ball gets out quickly. And sometimes it's more quickly than Young, who's a smaller guy and you'd expect, right? So I like those guys a little bit more. And then you get to Anthony Richardson, right? What do you do with this guy? And I watched 3 of his games, and I think he does more than I expected in terms of his ability moving within the pocket. He's fantastic at that. He can really he feels that pressure around him more than I really, at first glance, when you're watching these games and you're not really scouting, you look at a guy who's like, boy, he runs really well, right? I wouldn't want to try to tackle that guy. Mm-hmm. But the more you watch him, the more you see that he actually moves within the pocket pretty well. I'm not going to say he goes through like 4 progressions. I think Young is probably the best out of this group at doing that. But I think Richardson really feels the pressure around him more often than he's given credit for. And he's got a cannon. I mean, there's no way around that. My goodness, he can laser that ball. So I think his running ability and his even movement within the pocket's a little underrated right now. I think teams will see that, and they're going to really like that guy, going into the draft. So I think those top 3 guys, the more I watch of them, the more I see them maturing, and you just hope they can continue that ascension as they get more time to work on their craft. Because people forget, college quarterbacks, they got to go to school. They're limited, in theory, by the rules and how much time they can spend with their coaches. So you got to give them a little time to get better.
Listen, Anthony Richardson, I hate to use this phrase, but to me, he's a juiced up version of Malik Willis, and I was a fan of Malik Willis coming out. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster, and he's got just as good of arm that Anthony Richardson. So I would say this, I agree with you with C.J. Stroud. He can make all the throws, no doubt about it. Bryce Young can make the rare throws. Like I see him roll out, and he'll go opposite hash mark and throw that cross field bullet into a tight window. One of those old no. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I get excited about the upside of Bryce Young. I think Stroud is probably the safer selection at this point, but one guy who I didn't hear you talk too much about as being a top quarterback is Will Levis, and we just had Dane Vandernat on air, who was at the Missouri-Kentucky game last week, and he said there was some moments there that has him scratching his head. And I'll go back to the Ole Miss game where I thought there was at least 2 or 3 opportunities for Levis to pull that game out in the 4th quarter, and failed every opportunity that he had. And there was another game in between Ole Miss and Missouri. I know he missed a game or 2 with an injury, but there was another game where he had an opportunity to kind of bring his team back and didn't quite pull it off. And he's a quirky personality.
Yeah.
I think he'll interview well. He won't be for everybody,
Right.
His guy, Liam Cohen, actually, I think his offensive coordinator from last year is now with the Rams.
Yeah.
So what do you make of Will Levis?
Yeah, Levis reminds me of not necessarily in stature and everything, but he does have that Josh Allen about him in terms of everybody knows he's got a great arm. Everybody knows he's a tough runner. Everybody knows that. And when you watched Allen in his career in Wyoming, you're like, wait a minute, why isn't this guy winning these games? Why isn't he making these throws? Why is he not seeing the guy that's open? And I think a team like Detroit, I think, would be a great fit for him because, Dan Campbell's going to love the competitive nature, obviously. And if nothing else, Levis is as competitive as they come. And you see the raw tools there. And not with their top pick, maybe. I could see the Lions, if let's say they end up with one of the top 2 picks, they get like the Jalen Carter or something like that. But that second pick that they got from the Rams could be interesting with Detroit. And I think he could end up the 4th quarterback taken. And then in that middle of that first round. But I think he's got so much potential. And I think he's a competitive guy that I think his teammates, yes, he's a quirky personality, but I don't think that hurts him with his teammates. I think he's just fine there. I think he's a guy that his teammates know he's going to give it 100% all the time. And I think they're going to appreciate that. That guy's played through multiple injuries this year.
Yeah, he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy.
Yeah, so you take that, you take some of the good throws, you just try to get him off playing the hero ball, okay? And it's really difficult when you know the team is counting on you to make plays and win games, not to try to make those throws. Bryce Young does the same thing. He had a bad interception against Tennessee, was at LSU, when he's trying to get into the end zone. Oh, nope, can't get in the end zone. I'm going to throw this ball, and it's behind his receiver. It gets picked off. It was LSU. I think it was Bernard Converse that picked him off in the end zone, okay? So these guys do that because they know they have to make plays for their team to win. And so I'm not going to kill them on throwing the occasional hero ball because that's what happens in that position, especially in college. In the NFL, you can lean on your defense more. You can lean on your running game a little bit more, and you can get that out of them. Say, hey, take the check down, okay? So I think somebody will like Levis a lot, and I think he'll be in that mid-first round conversation. But right now, I think he's probably the 4th guy.
Well, it only takes one, right?
That's right.
Good old saying. So
I agree. I think in the first round, they never go in the order which we think they're going to go. I mean, there's something happens where they get mixed up a little bit. The second guy goes 3rd, the 3rd guy goes 2nd, whatever. It only takes one team. It takes Detroit showed last year. They went up and got Jameson Williams, even though he was hurt, right? So a team like Detroit falls in love with this guy and says, we like him more than a Richardson, or we like him more than Stroud or Young because of the size, whatever. So you never know. But I think right now it's probably the 4th guy.
Well, listen, Chad, we appreciate the time. We do have a quick question coming in from the chat room that I want to throw by you because I'm not asking you to put them in order, but the top 3 quarterbacks you mentioned, are they going to come off the board 1, 2, and 3? I have the most recent draft order here. It's Houston Texans, who could use a quarterback. Carolina Panthers probably need a quarterback. Las Vegas Raiders, maybe not so much. Pittsburgh Steelers, we know, don't need a quarterback. Detroit Lions,
I would guess that either of those 2 teams at 3 and 4 are going to be moving out. That would be my guess. And then the either top 3 guys will be quarterbacks, or 3 out of 4 will be quarterbacks, because somebody will move into one of those spots. That's my guess as of today. And Levis coming up, from the bottom there could be in that, depending on if somebody makes a move up into that 6 to 8 area or not, and then he ends up in the 10 to 12 kind of area. So that would be my guess as of today.
It's hard to disagree. All right, just for the record, as we sit here on November 10th, who is the number 1 quarterback on Chad's big board? Do you like Stroud? Do you like Young? Who's your personal liking right now?
You know what? They all have pluses and minuses, right? I think that teams will probably like Bryce Young the best. And so I'm going to take him 1. Despite the lack of height, I think he does all the things that you want a quarterback to do. He's got a very even keel attitude, very mature attitude, and he has since getting onto campus. I think teams will love that leadership, that attitude. They'll say, hey, look, Kyler Murray, #1 pick. He's been – and this guy's better. I think we'll make him the guy. And just look at his running. I mean, he's a fantastic runner, but he doesn't look to do it first. And I think you got that. I think he's the top guy as of today. But I don't think there's a big difference. I mean, I don't think there's a huge space between him and Stroud, him and Richardson. It's really going to come down to the team's preference. And I really think it's going to be interesting.
No, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And I will say I have a liking to Bryce Young because my two favorite interviews at the Maxwell Club last year were Jordan Davis and Bryce Young. Yeah. Bryce Young because he's so humble and he's got a little bit of Jalen Hurts in him where
he does.
Every question is deflected to a teammate. He gives praise to a teammate. Right. He deflects the accolades and always passes it forward. And I think that's going to go a long way come the interview process. So, we're 168 days, believe it or not, Chad.
I know. Coming.
only the sickos like you and I keep tabs on this, but we're checking off the days, we're counting them down, and I'm sure we'll pop you on back here towards the latter part of the season, get our NFL draft fix with you. We always appreciate the time, man. What do you got coming up next on the NFL.com? What can our listening audience find on the website, and where can they find all your great content?
Well, hopefully they've been checking out my Senior Bowl bi-weekly updates. Didn't happen this week because it's mid-season awards time. So next week we'll have another update of the Senior Bowl. And it'll be a little different because we're looking at team fits with the top 25 seniors that were on that Senior Bowl watch list. So, through the year, I kind of look at what they're doing, how they're playing. This one's going to be a little different. So stay tuned for that one. And we'll see some good team fits for these guys coming up in the first couple of rounds of the draft next year.
No, looking forward to it. I always use your list, too, when we do the NFL PA Bowl invites. So I go pull up your list. Okay, who's going to the Senior Bowl? Chad's projecting this. So thank you for the help along the way that you probably didn't know you were assisting us with. And, again, can't wait to have you back on here again, Chad. Always appreciate the time.
Appreciate it. And I appreciate, all the all-star games are awesome. They are just giving these guys opportunity.
Dude, we got to get you out to Pasadena. We need to get
working out my travel schedule.
Okay.
Working it out. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how
all your buddies are out there. My guy Rhett Lewis was out there. We had Jim Trotter out there. We got Sam Weiss was out there. I'm like, where's Chad at, man?
Well, we've got all those. That's the thing working for the NFL. There are so many great guys that cover all this stuff. I don't need to be everywhere, right? I got to get my tape from game. I can get my tape right. So, we can't send everybody everywhere. But I'm working out a travel schedule. That's all I'm going to say right now.
We're going to hopefully talk off air. We're gonna talk offline, see what we can do to get Chad out to LA, man.
I would love to go out.
It's a good place to be come January.
That's for sure. I'll be looking at snow outside my window here, and I won't be able to golf. So Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and Mobile. Those are three pretty good places to be in late January and early February.
All right, we'll see what we can do to dial you up and get you out there, Chad. Always appreciate the time. My daughter's home from school.
I see that. Hi, Oceana, and good to see you, Rick. And we'll talk soon.
All right, Chad. Appreciate the time.